a couple of years ago, this is really what got me on the transhumanism theme. And just, first of all, I really want to define transhumanism because, I know what I mean when I say it, but I don't think that my listeners always know what I mean when I say the word transhumanism. And when we say that, I mean this sort of, international, fast-growing, intellectual, cultural movement with plans on radically redesigning mankind, through the use of GRAND. So that's genetic, robotic, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology, or as I like to call it, this is the end of mankind as we know it, really, isn't it, Steve?
Absolutely. And you just gave a lovely and truly definitive description of transhumanism. Trans means across. So basically, let's make it simple. Transhumanism in its purest form means something in place of humanity that surpasses humanity. And it is, again, I love it. It's fallen men in total rebellion against the living God in their evil, desiring to be free of God, and they're never going to have to worry about facing eternal judgment. It's the oldest lie in the book. It's the oldest lie. It's the same lie that obviously in the Garden of Eden, and I literally believe in the Garden of Eden, and the thing is that when the devil appeared to Eve, he challenged the very thing that God had said, and he said, you shall not surely die. Obviously the Lord said, in the day that you eat of that, you'll die. Well, there's a difference between physical death and spiritual death, and right now the whole plan is this, and some of these guys are so sick, they want to wipe out every single human being on the planet, and we can talk about all the ways they've done that. We've done that on various shows, through the food we eat. Everything that is being done to us or is yet to be done to us is to destroy us, and guess what comes in its place? But now the overlords want called the techno-servants that they create and whatever caste system and whatever level of intelligence to rule the world, but under them. But let's face it, what happens when the under them entities start to turn on the overlords? And that's a whole argument itself. You and I have talked extensively in past interviews about the effect of Hollywood. Ladies and gentlemen, whether you've seen The Terminator, Gattaca, Avatar, any of those movies, you're being told ahead of time what their plans are for you.
Well, Steve, as you were talking about the garden, I kept thinking about that whole premise where Satan was saying, you won't die, you'll become like a god. And this is really the resounding theme of all this, is becoming immortal, becoming like God. And what really stunned me and kind of got me into this so-called rabbit hole was I saw the front cover of Time magazine, and I was stunned, Steve, because the caption was this: 2045, the year man becomes immortal. And I thought, these people are out of their minds. But what disturbed my spirit was the thought that this really is the end of man as we know it. Because you're right, this isn't a science fiction. This is actually unfolding before us. And then it's very ironic that a week ago, Steve, and speaking of creepy front page captions, last week a National Geographic cover caught my eye called The Science of the Brain. And as I was flipping through it, there was a similar eerie overtone to that Time magazine. It was essentially saying that scientists have now figured out the interplay between our brain, our cells, our traits, our behaviors, and that we can now essentially upgrade. That's the word that stood out, upgrade our brain. And so in your book, Xenogenesis, it really discusses how the transhumanist movement embraces the notion that science and technology can improve human mental and physical characteristics and capacities. So in other words, it views sickness, aging, and death as really unnecessary hindrances that we have the right and the responsibility to overcome. So our bodies are just these frail, unpredictable, just another problem for engineers to solve, and it implies that with the right tools, we might be able to fix and improve, quote unquote, ourselves. Weigh in on that notion, Steve. This idea that we have to upgrade ourselves.
Well, that's the basis of the comic book characters, and also it's the basis of the mighty men of renown. When we read about, let's just take the mythological, who I believe wasn't mythological, but he was a literal, if you will, giant of a man, Hercules. Mankind has always been fascinated and will yet be experiencing the mythological creatures of the past. Even in the Old Testament, Sheila, God talks about Leviathan and Behemoth, the two large sea monsters, if you will, that ancient antiquity refers to, but modern science just blows everything away. But isn't it fascinating that everything that modern science has denied, and when you get into the transhumanist realm, what you're immediately confronted with, and the singularity when humans become machines and they merge, and that year is set for 2045. Some people say 2030, some people say 2045. I believe outside of God's intervention, the 2030 is the timeline on that. So what we're talking about is the mythical creatures, the comic book characters, and all of the push to attenuate mankind, to make him something greater than he is, and not realizing the masterpiece that he was created as, that sin has basically stained and tarnished. But mankind is something that's unique, and there's no modifier in front of the word unique. We are in the image and likeness of God, and what Scripture is cool about is the Bible specifically says that Jesus didn't come to give himself a ransom for the fallen angels. He came to give himself a ransom for us. And the idea that we're in the image and likeness of the living God must absolutely drive Satan and the fallen angels nuts. It must be the most disgusting thing they can ever imagine. By the way, in my research, I found that it was a discourse between one of the fallen angels and Satan, and one of the manuscripts I read were the whole theory of evolution, because in antiquity, there was a statement that when God had created mankind, it was something that had never been seen before, obviously, and God commanded the angels of heaven not to worship man, but to worship God in this thing he had done. And believe it or not, there's a dialogue in antiquity thousands of years ago where Satan said, I'm not going to worship those monkeys.
It reminds me of Nimrod, the DNA rewrite,
absolutely.
That's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, and Tom Horn teaches that Nimrod began to become a Gibborim. Okay, that Gibborim is one of the Hebrew words for giants. So what's fascinating, though, is that all these guys are quirky, okay? And evolution, Huxley, everybody that, Julian Huxley, Aldous Huxley, the Huxley family name, these guys absolutely, they veer from believing true evolution, and yet they build the argument that mankind can ultimately make himself into something other than he is now and completely divorce himself from God, yet they want to be set up as gods themselves. Isn't that interesting? Right back to the Garden of Eden. Knowing good and evil, ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil. Now, let me tell you how the Illuminati works, and this is really important for people to understand. It's imperative for them that they realize or think that they are a higher level than everybody else, okay? I posted a story, maybe you did too, or saw the story about the Billionaires Club in New York and how they openly mock the 99%, that's everybody other than them, mock Hillary Clinton, that's not, they probably know more than we do, and dress in drag, okay? I don't know if people saw that, but it's a Daily Mail article. Well, what it shows is the contempt, and I maintain that obviously when Jesus said that the love of money is the root of all evil, the control of money is the control of all evil. So in that control, by basically promising the elite that they'll never die, and this is their promise, okay, that they'll never age, they'll never grow old, and if your body has any breakdowns, nanobots will fix it, and you'll be right up and raring to go in whatever perversion of the day you would like.
Well, Jesus often said, let no man be deceived. Take heed that no man deceive you. But it almost seems like these guys are doing this beta testing, Steve, to see how far they can push this on the public. Yet here's an interesting thing. The public hasn't bat an eye when you've got, former head of DARPA, Regina Dugan, saying people are going to actually want this high-tech hell, I call it, Steve. This really is the start of the it's. And it's so apocalyptic because, we think of the seed, the offspring. When you're altering DNA, that is really the spirit of the Antichrist, is it not?
Absolutely. And therefore, that's why I spend so much time dealing with the whole idea of xenogenesis. You must understand, and I must understand, that these people are way beyond what we know. Fortunately, by the grace of God,
I've been privy to information from people who know what they know, and even 10 years ago when I wrote Genetic Armageddon, people couldn't receive it. But yet, if you notice, what are the themes right now on the major movies coming out? It's basically technology, it's basically resurrection, that even the television program, now I didn't watch it and I don't know the storyline, but instantly my spirit showed me what was behind that thing. And well, let's just talk about the occult, okay? What most people don't understand, and they've got to understand this separation in terms, a demon is a disembodied spirit. Those things walk around in different places on the earth waiting to find a host. That's where we get demon possession. It should be very striking to most people to see that these strange, macabre deaths and grisly murders and cannibalism and all of the wickedness that's coming on this planet. It's like someone turned on a switch and behold, it's all there. And the old gods, which were bound by God's mercy, meaning, and I'm talking about the fallen angels, the ones, and only 200 of the fallen angels originally fell, and, you know, a third of the angels in heaven fell. And somebody tried to tell me they could calculate it. And I said, you can't do that. You can't calculate a third of an innumerable sum, you know. It's kind of like the old statement, well, how many angels can you fit on the head of a pin? The answer is they don't want to sit on the head of a pin, and only a pinhead would answer that or ask that question. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to be sarcastic. We are at such a strange confluence of events going on. U.S. military, you know, in the artificial intelligence chapter, and anybody who's got an iPhone, what do they have right now? They probably don't realize it, but they're carrying a pretty sophisticated form of AI in Syria, are they not?
Yes. And it's funny you should mention Siri because, you know, what's interesting, Steve, is this very macabre, creepy trend that we need to become more intimate, you know, interaction-wise with machines. And with each phase, these machines are doing very bizarre kind of, you know, they want to really have an intimate interface, like with each other, like us and the machine. So Siri, Google now, and you've got this very sci-fi horror show movie called Her in the movies that essentially talks about having a very intimate relationship with these machines. I mean, that is a really spooky trend that I'm seeing as well, Steve.